Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war, but what's that gun you're toting? And even the Jordan River has bodies floating. But you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Don't you understand what I'm trying to say? Can't you feel the fears I'm feeling today? If the button is pushed, there's no running away. There'll be no one to save with the world in a grave. Take a look around you, boy. It's bound to scare you, boy.
Black people. There will just be people who will be off. There will be no fights. There will be no destruction. We are going to be united.
How do you ask a man to be the last man to die in Vietnam?
Destruction. Yeah, my blood's so...
Right here, Columbus, Texas. February the 20th, 1946. Well, I grew up, we had 2 ranches.
I was born here in Colorado County in Weimar, Texas. Grew up in Weimar, went to St. Michael's School, Bishop Forrest High School.
I was born in Houston, 1945. Grew up there in the East End. And had a good childhood.
And they were always in the family when I grew up. The other one is just across the interstate, and we call that the home place, and that's where I grew up. And they're still in the family. The old house is still there.
Went to the neighborhood school. The one thing about East End and Houston, everybody was more or less like a big family.
But you know, it's just my father was a rancher, and my whole life, and so you know, we were farm boys, country boys, my brother and I. My mother taught school.
We were kind of situated in between the ship channel and where the Gulf Freeway is now, and the sprawling residential areas going up. So
all of my life, and so I guess I get my academic interest from her. But I was always, you know, just a country boy, and we helped out around my father was strictly ranching. We never did any farming except for raising hay. But he, in addition to our own land, he leased land, and he also managed a large ranch for a Houston family. And so between all those, we had thousands of acres of land to roam over as kids, you know. And horses and jeeps and hunting was always a big part of my life.
everybody was real closely compacted, and we knew each other in the neighborhood. We knew each other, their family, and sometimes their cousins, and everything about them. And they were, it was just it was a group that was tightly knit, and to this day there's still many of us that are still in contact with each other.
And that's your father?
Yeah.
All right.
He was an acrobat, and when they built the Niels Epperson building in Houston, it was the tallest building at the time. And when they finished it, he went up there and did a handstand. He was asked him why, and he said, "Well, why did Hillary climb Everest?
Because it was there."
That's right. And he said that's something that I was. And my dad, he died when he was 98.
It is a solemn responsibility to have to order even limited military action by forces whose overall strength is as vast and as awesome as those of the United States of America.
So I volunteered. I went to I was going to the University of Houston, and of course I was no genius, so my grades weren't that great. But so I was in a student union one day, and they had a television on, and there was the first American that was killed over in Da Nang.
You volunteered.
I was drafted when I went to the Houston to the draft board for the physical and all that. There was a lot of guys from Colorado County and Fayette County that went to was on the bus when we went to Houston.
No, I was drafted. And for those who aren't aware, the draft was abolished in 1973. So most people today have only a very vague notion of what the draft entailed. But
And I just, for some reason, said, maybe I saw too many John Wayne movies or something, I don't know, but I said, hey, if there's a fight going to go on, I think I'm going to be part of it. So I went ahead and volunteered back in 1965, joined the Air Force.
And Francis Janishek was one of them, and Hillard Till from Weimar. And that's the two I remember most. And then there was a black guy named Armstrong that was on it. But we had a busload of young men going in.
You could get a deferment then, a student deferment for going to college, and that was called 2S. They had a system of deferments. And so I started right out of, when I graduated in 1964 from Columbus High School, went right to Texas A&M.
Went to basic training in Lackland, and from Lackland I went to, when I went into the recruiter, he said, I said, two things I want to do, I want to fly, and I want to get over into the war. He said, man, do I have a place for you? So
Then I went into the service in January of '66.
Right as it was getting heavy.
Yeah, right at the beginning of everything. And went to boot camp in Louisiana, which was, I don't know, I think boot camp was maybe 8 weeks, 12 weeks, I don't recall.
Which was then an all-military, all-male school. The A&M of that has very little resemblance to the A&M of today. We're 8,000 students, and you were required to be in the Corps of Cadets when you were an undergraduate, and there were no women. So it was all male, and it was the only ROTC program in the state of Texas that
they put me in aircraft mechanics, and so I went to, from Lackland, I went to, after getting out of boot camp, went over to Wichita Falls, and that's where we took the technical school, to where you learn all about the plane and everything else.
But I know it was cold and miserable in Louisiana. That's for sure.
That's unusual.
Yeah. But yeah, and it was all, young guys, 18, 19, 20, just a bunch of young kids. And then from there, after boot camp, I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia.
where it was compulsory, whether you intended to go in the military. So I spent 2 years at A&M. I was in the Corps of Cadets, and I learned all about military things. How to salute, how to shine your brass and shoes, and all that sort of thing, which gave me a real heads up when I was drafted into the Army.
And I met some people there that even to today, we're still in contact with each other. This one guy I met in basic training, and he was also in the same MOS, or the same area of his duties as I was. He was also an aircraft mechanic on C-130s.
into the advanced, well, AIT program, and went into the Marine Division of the Army. And that was another 10, 12 weeks. And after that, I was shipped out to Vietnam.
But I didn't really care. I transferred from A&M after my sophomore year to the University of Texas at Austin, mainly because I was interested in the liberal arts. And at that time, A&M was an agricultural and mechanical school. I had a very underdeveloped liberal arts program. So that's why I transferred.
So we kind of went together through basic, then through Wichita Falls to technical school. Then we both got shipped out to Okinawa, to Naha, Okinawa. And then from there we went, we flew down to Vietnam.
And then I studied history and German literature at the University of Texas, and I graduated in January of 1969. And that meant that my student deferment ended. You could only get a student deferment as long as you were an undergraduate making satisfactory progress toward your degree. The war was real. People were dying, and it was on the TV screen every night. For the first time in the history of the world, you had a televised.
So everybody saw what was happening.
Yeah, for the first time. At the University of Texas, my generation began to be very much aware of the Vietnam War. When I was at A&M, I was hardly aware. I couldn't have told you where Vietnam was if my life depended on it. But our consciousness about the war grew, and especially after the Tet Offensive, which happened more or less all of 1968. And it was a period of great student unrest, and that is when my political consciousness began to develop, which was fueled by the fact that I was heading toward the draft, and 100% of the people who were classified 1A were drafted then. So I was torn between the belief that one should serve one's country and opposition to what our country was doing. And so that was my dilemma. And a dilemma of not a few, not a lot of people, So it wasn't that I was resisting the idea of having to serve my country. It's just I didn't want to serve it in a war that I disagreed with. So what to do? But there was another classification for those who were willing to serve in the military, put on a uniform, as long as they received no weapons training and could not be compelled to use weapons. And the fact that by checking that box, I was almost guaranteed not only to be, in the Army, but to be in combat. I think that persuaded them. And they accepted my application. I think I am the only conscientious objector to ever come from Colorado County.
All the young guys, 18, 19 years old, 20, they lost their lives, never was able to, you know, fulfill their dreams. But yeah, it brings tears to your eyes when you think about it.
Well, Vietnam, I was, as I said, I was an aircraft mechanic on C-130s, and if you're not familiar with C-130s, they are military cargo or just transport. And they were actually called an assault transport. I looked some of these figures up because I wanted to make sure I had them right for the deal. And I couldn't remember them all, but
From the Army, basically, that flew into Cam Bay, I think it was Cam Bay, that's where the biggest airfield was at, and that's where all the troops landed in, and then from there, they went to the different parts of Vietnam to their units they were assigned to. And I was assigned to the 1099.
You go through basic training, same for everybody. Then you take a specialty training, which is called AIT, Advanced Individual, where you learn to infantryman or a truck repairman or a truck driver, or you name or medic. And you're assigned a number. I was 91B20. That was my MOS, Military Occupation Specialty. And I had training for that. But you go to Vietnam, you're assigned a unit. I'd be assigned to a truck pool, motor pool at Long Binh, and you spend your whole tour of duty there.
the 130s could land and take off in an assault, short runways and dirt strips. That's primarily where we were headed. And what we would be doing, we would be in Naha, Okinawa, and they might have a mission for us. We might go down to Vietnam to Cam Bay, is normally where we would go, and we would sit there and we would fly out of there to different bases, bringing things in and troops or supplies.
It was a transportation unit, but I was on the boat, River Rat unit, and in where we was at outside of Saigon, there was only like 24 of us in that company. That's with the officer, lieutenant, first sergeant, master sergeant, but there were maybe 24 at the most.
We wanted one of us on the plane. Anytime it flew, we wanted one of us on there. I think it's because they figured that if we were going to be on there, we would make darn sure that the thing was in good shape to go. So, or whatever their reasoning was, it was fine with us. Like I said, we got a lot of airtime. So he came up and says, "Chief, you don't have to fly with us. It's Christmas Eve." And I said, "No, I'd just as soon go rather than stay here and listen to a bunch of people moan about not being home." So, and Bob Hope's not here tonight, so the heck with it. I'll go. So we went.
In the sky, going on to the spirit in the sky. That's where I'm gonna go when I die.
We were at 3, I would say, scrimmages with, because we was in the river and the boats make noise, and you can't really tell until something hits the boat. And we had a 50 caliber machine gun and an M60 machine gun that was set up, and it had armor plating, but where the armor plating was at, we had sandbags stacked against the armor plating, because the armor plating wouldn't stop anything but small arms fire. So we had sandbags stacked up against the armor plating where we usually got behind. But
Like when I was reassigned to Cu Chi, I was assigned guard duty out on the wire, because occasionally the sappers would try to sneak in and blow up something. So I showed up for guard duty, and the sergeant said, "Well, where's your weapon?" And I said, "Well, I don't have one, I'm a CO." And he said, "Well, do you want one?" And I said, no. He said, okay, well, here's your spot. So I did guard duty all night long without a weapon. And I'm looking out, peering out over the, I say, now, if one of these sappers shows up, what the hell am I supposed to do? Throw a rock at him?
One of those little dirt strips. We were coming in and it was dark, and the co-pilot looked out there and he said, oh look, they're celebrating. They're shooting fireworks, it's celebrating. And the flight mechanic, he looked up and he said, that's not celebrating. He said, those are tracers, we're under fire. So he reached up there and knocked off the landing lights. And
The two scrimmages, one time we had a fuel barge, and the mortars, they tried to mortar the fuel barge to explode it, and they kept falling. They fired 3 mortars, and one of them probably was 75 yards in back of us, and the next one was about 50 yards in back of us. And then the next one came, it was probably less than 25, because the water, we could feel the water come up, and we got a kind of an idea of what area it was coming from, and we just opened fire with a 50 caliber machine gun and M60s and kind of just sprayed the shoreline of the river, and apparently we got close to it because they didn't fire any more rounds.
The pilot got on the radio and told the tower, says, we're taking fire. They said, yeah, we know that's been there, for a while. Would you mind making another pass? So he said, okay. So we flew out, went out for about a mile or so, or however long it was, and then we came back in. We turned the lights back on, and they started up again. And once they started up, he got on the horn and he says, we're taking fire again. And they said, okay, we got it under control, thank you. And all of a sudden, it was just like a streak. I guess they had some fighters, some F-4s or something, was flying around waiting to get a good spot on it. And once they got a good area, knew where it was, they came in, dropped a couple of napalm on them. I mean, it was just like a shot of fire goes right out there. So they used us as bait. So that was, but we didn't mind, because every time we took off or landed, and if it was at night or any place, we took fire.
But that was, and then there was a couple of times where we just had small arm fire. But I was fortunate that I didn't have to shoot anybody or get shot or anything, or lost my life.
I mean, the first thing I had to deal with as a fresh medic was I got assigned to this artillery battery, so they flew me out in the field. I'm out there. I had my medic's bag, which mainly has pressure patches and things like pressure bandages. And there was a mass casualty situation. I mean, with children who had been playing with a grenade, because we were set up about a couple of kilometers from a village, and kids would hang outside the wire, and when they'd bring trash out, they would root to it. They found a grenade, and it went off. There were 20 children. I had to perform triage. I had to decide who's going to die, and there's nothing you can do about it. Who's only slightly wounded, so you don't mess with them. And who you could, if you intervene, you might have a chance of saving. And I did that with 10 weeks training. These are the sorts of things that haunt you. I'd be assigned to a truck pool, motor pool, at Long Bend, and you spend your whole tour of duty there. There's never a change, you never moved around, you spend your whole tour of duty there. And the chief problem for these, we call them RIMPs, rear area motherfuckers. That was a term everybody in RIMP, that was our pejorative term for the people that spent their whole tour inside the wire. And their chief problem was boredom. and dealing with it. Because they worked 7 days a week. And then they retired to their little hooches and anesthetized themselves with beer or marijuana or whatever. And, you know, listened to rock music. They separated out. The heads listened to, you know, Jimi Hendrix and psychedelic rock, and the rednecks listened to country music, and the blacks listened to soul music. And it separated out into these little cliques, you know. And but it was a different story for the 10% of us that were outside the wire. Except for 2 months, I was outside the wire my whole tour of duty.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire. I'll take you to burn. Fire. I'll take you to learn. I'll see you burn.
The first air cab was fundamentally different from the other units because it was experimental. It was the first all helicopter air assault unit. We had no artillery pieces, we had no tanks, we had nothing but helicopters. And the 101st was also all air assault, all helicopters. So these are experiments in Vietnam, but that was different. They did everything with helicopters.
And all you become, I'll feel you burn. You've been living like a little girl.
So I volunteered for medevac. Our dust off, we went by 2 different names, dust off and medevac. And but the first air cab's dust off was integral to the first air cab. They had their own helicopters. Most of the other units, dust off was, they had their separate command and control. They had their own birds, and they weren't really affiliated with any division. They were independent, but we were integral. But it's the same thing. The first time that in the history of war where we used helicopters to evacuate troops. Okay, and you had your dedicated crews and dedicated birds. We had a big Red Cross on them, you know, and they were outfitted too. They were all Hueys, you know, but
and they threw that big son of a bitch on top of me. Well, they had him on a stretcher, you know, and they just kind of, you know, just pitched me in there. Well, I'm trying to hold the stretcher up because the weight is on my chest and it's on my stomach and it's bothering me. So I'm holding it up and he's bleeding profusely. And, you know, the chopper lifts up and the wind's coming in. I could feel the blood coming off the, and so anyway, I'm holding on. And
so it was an all volunteer unit. Dust off, and you had to be seasoned. You couldn't join it unless you had experience, had proven yourself. And the pilots, because they did the most intricate, demanding flying in Vietnam, all had special training stateside to be dust off pilots. I mean, they had to be able, they were the best of the best. And we had the highest casualty rate in Vietnam because we were in every firefight, every battle, we were there. Okay, when we plucked the people right out of the firefights.
we get to Da Nang and they offload us, and you know they take us into a prepping room for emergency surgery, and it's something like you've seen on MASH, but you don't realize that it's happening. They start with a pair of scissors at your boots, and as they're laced up, they just cut the laces all the way up. They come up your leg, they come up your arm. Same thing on this side. They take that top of that clothing, just peel it off of you, take your boots off, pick you up, butt naked, slide you on another gurney, and then you're ready to go to surgery.
Wow.
And they take
That quick.
Just that quick. They take your clothes that you were wearing, they bundle them up in a bag, your personal effects, tie them to the gurney, and off you go to surgery. And so, anyway, I went to surgery. They repaired my large and small intestines. They cut bigger holes where the shrapnel went in. They just sutured this up, and about 3 days in intensive care. Then they put me in a hot ward. After about a week or 10 days, they come in there and they tell you you're gonna shit and you ain't eating nothing in 10 days, and so they stick a suppository up your ass and they make you shit, and then it's just because you got to get it out of your system. You got to get that old dried up blood back out of there. And anyway, they do that, and then they give you a cigarette if you smoke, and once the doctor gives you a cigarette, then you can smoke. And so at that time I still smoked. And anyway, I got a little bit better.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day.
So I enjoyed it. What can I say? Even though it was dangerous as hell, I kind of enjoyed it. It's fun to ride around on helicopters. It's a real sense of flying because we left the doors open. They were wide open, and you sat there and you looked out, and you felt like a bird. We had a real tight camaraderie, but it was quite dangerous, actually. My tour of duty was nearing an end, and in fact, I wasn't supposed to be flying anymore. You usually don't go into action the last week of your, but they came down and a call that there was a firefight and serious casualties, and sucking chest wound. And they needed to put a crew together, and the medic was sick, who was flying first up, and second up and third up were already in the air. And so I volunteered. And I wasn't even in full uniform. And I grabbed my 8-bag, and I just bought a cassette recorder. And I'm thinking I'm leaving in 1 week, and it'd be nice to tape a mission, just to show what it was like. So I stuck the microphone in a spare helmet that had, plugged it in the intercom. Put some gauze around it, turned it on, and off we went.
Roger, 2 things. 1, do you intend to medevac all people hit? And 2, do you want to use the napalm? If not, they're going to hit the break station in about 10 minutes. The guy's got a real bad bleed. Roger, could you get us some specifics on that pickup, please? Roger, P40 shrapnel, 01 with shrapnel in chest, possibly in lungs. Do you have whole blood aboard? Yes, no. As opposed to her partner, we sure do. Is there any way to take a bunch your position at this time?
And so when they take casualty and the guy's got a sucking chest wound, so you got to get him out or you're going to die, okay? So, Goofy Grape, they call it on the tape, which is grape smoke.
Anybody see any smoke? Come back to your 8 o'clock position, Dave. I think I saw some Goofy Grape. This right now is your 11 o'clock position, straight and over, get it.
They're still, in the jungle, they're still 50 feet apart in the jungle. The gooks are over here with a machine gun, and they're behind the big log, and we have to hover down through, and these pilots are so good, see, they can't see. They're having to be talked down by the gunner and the crew chief. You're clipping limbs on the right, Dave, 2 feet to the left, 3 feet back. And so he's just sitting there, and he does that, and we're coming down through the hole. And we stop at a hover at 50 feet above them. We're looking down, there are the GIs behind the big log.
Get on down. We see any muzzle flash, we're going to fire, right? No, don't fire because they must. Just like coming at us. Probably friendlies.
And I can see the guy on the ground, you know, the wounded guy. And I throw a special litter down, but they strap him in. And I start running the hoist down to pick him up. We can't land, you know. And then, you know, we had, coming down, we had heard machine gun fire, but there was a lull in the fire. They're not firing. And we get over and they strap him in a hot hoist where we're hovering, trying to hoist somebody up in a helicopter, and we came under point blank machine gun.
30's been ahead. Something hit me. I don't know what the fuck it was. Anybody hurt or something? God damn. We're taking hits. Get out. Curdy got hit. Get him back. Curdy got hit. Yeah, I'm hit. I'm hitting the front and the right upper leg.
And I stopped 3 rounds. And we took over 20 hits in the helicopter. I mean, we just raked us from one end to the next with a machine gun, point blank range. And
Are you home better? You hurt, partner? I don't know. I might live. I might not. If I don't, tell my parents I love them. I always wonder what it's like to get shot. Now I know. It hurts like hell.
I mean, my wounds were serious, but they were not life-threatening. And I, you know, as a medic, I knew that right away. So when you listen to me on the tape, I'm almost ecstatic coming out of it, because I knew I had really, all rights, I should have been dead, or worse, got shot, or you know, but it just there. I mean, I got a bone shot out of my foot, and a round plowed up the side of my leg, opened my leg, but it missed the bone, and then I got a flesh wound in my arm. So, you know, because we went in the middle of a firefight and tried to extract somebody, we were all awarded Distinguished Flying Crosses for heroism. Personally, by the commanding general, General Malloy. So that was my highest decoration, was the Distinguished Flying Cross for heroism. But I already had gotten 3 Air Medals with V for heroism, and 6 Army Commendation Medals with V, and a Bronze Star with V. So I have 14 combat citations,
That's pretty good.
including Purple Heart.
And all of a sudden I heard the shooting.
Soldiers and Nixon's coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming. For dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it. Soldiers are cutting us down. Should have been done long ago. Wanna give you her and found her dead on the ground. How can you run?
Unfortunately, they never did anything like that to me, because I waited for, you know, like I said, for about a year. Because when you was over there, all you hear about is these protests going on in California and everything else. And I was waiting for a year, you know, I was getting ready, so as soon as that happened, I'd be able to explode on them.
I'm not going to say that didn't happen, but it never happened to me.
Okay.
Never happened to me. The problem, there was a psychological problem though, and to me, I think a lot of that has actually been exaggerated. That's my personal opinion. But it's understandable because there was a real psychological adjustment.
I did. I flew in. We stopped. Usually the stop was either in Hawaii or maybe Guam to refuel. And I flew into California. And And I got into California, and it was at night.
I was disgusted with it. I guess when sometimes when some of our sorties we would go in and land in, sometimes we had to load up with body bags and everything else, and I'd, we'd fly back and I'd look at the bags sitting laying up here in the racks, and I'd say, man.
That a lot of people, not knowing how to discuss it, they pick up the narrative like you were supposed to have been spat upon and all that. It never happened to me. Of course, I came over on a damn one of those big what were they, C-140 jet planes that they had was suspended from the ceiling on a litter. And I flew directly from Camp Yama, Japan to California, and from there they refueled and we went to Fort Sam, where I ended up for nearly 6 months in the hospital, 5 months.
I had transfers to go from California to Houston, so I never did experience any of that. And when you're in Vietnam, you didn't really know what was going on in the United States, because you didn't get.
Yeah, that's what I heard. I mean, I researched that news.
Yeah, it was.
You hear about these fellas out there in California, they're sitting around doing nothing, just complaining and everything else. And a lot of the guys were just, they were irritated with it, and he said it's unjust, it's not right,
So, I wasn't really exposed to the public that much, and so maybe it was different for those who flew back on commercial flights. I don't know.
I don't know, these people nowadays, they protest about every damn thing. I mean,
Right? They do.
I mean, they send military out to go do a job, and then somebody gets killed or injured. That was an accident, or they were like the friendly forces or whatever. Well, you can't control that. Things are going to happen in war, but no, we got people in the government that doesn't see it that way.
We're here getting shot at and everything else. We're the ones sitting here like laying at night, sometime in our little hooch, which is the Air Force, we had it a lot easier than the other guys, but a hooch is like a tent with plywood for sides. And you'd lay there at night sometimes, and it'd be all arid, and you'd be tired and sweaty and sticky. And you're laying in those deadgum canvas cot trying to sleep. And
it is so difficult to explain to somebody who was not there what it was like. And that's why I think veterans tend to congregate, because they know here's somebody who understands. And it's not just that it was so terrible, it's just, you just cannot convey through words, to somebody who really wasn't there, And so it's always a exercise in frustration to try to talk about it.
you think about those guys sitting there in the air conditioning watching football or drinking with their girlfriends or something, going out on a date, and you're stuck out here and can't do anything, and you're miserable, and they're the ones complaining about and everything else, and you're the one who's doing it so they can do that. So you just don't think it wasn't a fair deal. And there was quite a few people there, like in our little hooch, and I think there was about 9 or so in our tent. And there was a lot of animosity. A lot of those guys said, I can't wait to get home and get my hands on some of those boys.
One thing I did find out when I was in Vietnam was that all that bombing we did in North Korea, we had jets, B-52s flying there daily and dropping bombs and bombs and bombs and bombs. Well, hell, they dropped them in the same place they did the week before. So, I mean, they were flying and they were reporting and they're bombing, but they were basically bombing the same places they did before. And so I don't know. Sometimes I wonder about what the hell we was doing in Vietnam. well, it'd be 67, early 67. And I didn't even watch the news. They were still talking about Vietnam. I just couldn't turn it on. And I just didn't want to have any, brought back memories, I guess. And even though I didn't have it that bad, it was just, memories it brought back.
Inside sales, took sales on order for a scientific company in Houston. They sold all kind of scientific equipment, anything from microscopes to test tubes to this spectrometers and all this stuff like that. I did that, and
well, before I went in, I had I graduated. Then I had like 4 months. I did get a job in Houston with an air conditioning company. And when I came back, it was a small company, but the guy, told me when I get back that I have a job. So
Well,
he
that's
did.
good.
He did rehire me.
I was a musician. I played in band. Started back in '63, so I did that. I was still playing.
What was your band's name?
The name was the Tim Fisher and the Roulettes.
There you go.
We never were real big, but we had some great musicians. We were friends with a lot of good of the top bands there in Houston. Seemed like we all just kind of rotated from one. They would play in one place one week, and we'd play in it the next week. And where we were playing, one of the other bands would come take our place. We just rotated around.
I didn't like crawling in the attics.
Especially during the summer in Texas.
Because we redid it. They were remodeling the church, and we were up in the attic with insulation, old insulation, and that stuff. Man, my arms broke out with all kind of rashes and stuff, and I said, "This is not for me." And my cousin Thomas Hudetz, he was working for an electrical contractor, and he called me up and said they were hiring. So I went. Worked for him, and then I went through their training, 4 years of their training program, and received my journeyman license and was an electrician till I retired.
And we all did the same songs and pretty much the same arrangements. So, it was not, if somebody was sick, like if like CL in the pictures, if Trent was sick or had something to do, they'd call me, and I said, sure, I'll sit in. So got to set in, and went back to school for a little bit.
And what you doing now that you're retired?
Pretty much nothing.
That's a good thing.
No,
working on a bunch of projects.
That's good too.
I had it in my mind that I was going to build me a barnuminium. So while I was still working, I'd come down here on weekends, and my son was in high school.
We opened up a club there in Houston called the Act 3, and there was a little group called the Bobby Doyle Trio. There was 3 guys, and they did a lot of harmony and everything else. And their bass player, a big upright bass. Their bass player was Kenny Rogers. And
Kenny Rogers?
Yeah.
Wow.
And they would play after hours stuff, and so they were playing after hours. We'd play from 8 to midnight.
And he would come down with me and help me, and we started working on the barnuminium, and then I got Chupac, not Chupac, LaGrange.
Yeah.
And they poured the slab for me. They put up the building, and after that I worked on building the barnuminium, and I got it. Took me 2.5 years to build it, but I got it done.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I always was looking forward to retiring where I could come out here and get up in the mornings whenever I wanted to, go out there and cut down a tree or whatever needed to be done, clear it out and do something with it, be productive. But I had a George Patton stroke back in 2016. I called it George Patton stroke because it was no major stroke. It was a full-blown four-star general stroke. So I paralyzed my left side. So all that time I was waiting to go out and do this stuff. Now I can't do it. So.
Now all Americans can agree that Vietnam veterans deserve recognition and appreciation for their sacrifices, and that is why the Vietnam Veterans Memorial stands here today.
And in 1982, the memorial was dedicated with 50,000 Vietnam veterans there. And they embraced the wall. The nation embraced the wall.
It was pretty apparent that this was going to have a profound impact on what needed to happen, which was to heal the wounds of the war.
You packed your bags and shut the door. You crossed the sea to fight a war. You didn't know just what would happen to you. Stepped in the dirt, boots on the ground, and gunfire was the only sound.
I didn't really have any pros or cons about it. I just what I figured that we needed, the Vietnam needed something to honor us that we were in Vietnam.
I couldn't wait to see it.
Okay.
When it came to LaGrange, I saw the traveling wall, and then I went on the honor flight to from Austin, honor flight to Washington.
No, I haven't, and that's a big regret. I have been to, there was a sort of traveling version of it that went around, I saw that. I've only been to Washington, D.C. once in my life.
And to yourself, you whispered hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
In fact, I got a picture up here somewhere of me up against the wall, and I had my
Oh, I see it. I'll definitely get a picture of that.
yeah, I had my dog tags, and I was holding up against the wall.
A lot of people, said it wasn't a war, but hell, it was a war. People got killed, and I did go see the wall in Washington D.C. and it's quite impressive. And for each name on it, I don't really know. I guess it's all right at least.
I think the fact where you can visualize through all these names, you get a sense of what a war is about. It's about death and destruction and ruined lives.
Done. You have the strength to carry on. You thought it'd be.
So I was glad to see that they did that, and it seems like a lot of the veterans really need to come up there because that's a moving experience.
You got people that go there, look at it. They have, people they can look up. Because in our unit, in the unit I was in, when I was there, there was two soldiers that was killed. And when I went to the wall, I did look them both up.
And of all the monuments, I think that one has to be the most powerful. It conveys something. It doesn't just convey heroism or sacrifice. I mean, it conveys the true cost of a war. War is destruction. And I don't know how many. We lost time. I know that 4 died, and several of us were wounded. So if I went to, if I ever go to the wall, I will look up the names of my classmates who were killed: Childress and Higgins and Ramirez, and that will be a very powerful and emotional experience for me. But I think a lot of the other monuments, they're powerful for the veterans, but they're not powerful for non-veterans. I think it just strikes me that the Vietnam Wall is a powerful experience for non-veterans as well. Perhaps more so than any other war monument in Washington. For that very reason, I mean, you just see it, you know.
I was born on the 4th of July. Stars and stripes and American pride. Granddaddy came back from a war in France. Daddy fought a war against internment camps. I turned 18, I was bold and brave. Then I heard the call from LBJ. He said, son, I need you in a foreign land. So I said goodbye for Vietnam. Send me down for my boot camp to tear me down and build me back. They said, welcome to your home, Fort Dix. You're fighting for our politics. Then I found myself on my way to a foreign shore, asked to fight another man I never met before. Lord, please help me get back home. Marched all day in the highlands with the sun in my eyes and a gun in my hand. Every day was like the one before. Hot as hell, and when it rained it poured. Then a man on his throne in Saigon said, take that hill till Charlie's gone. Rest assured we're gonna win this war, but I was never sure how they were keeping score. Then hell rained down as we ran out toward a gunfire storm. Fighting for each other, we were brothers in arms. Young men died and gave their lives in this hell we call war. So why do I get to go back home? Found my way back to my hometown, but there was no parade, no job well done. They spit on me and threw words like stones, yelling baby killer, and the list goes on. So I hid my pride from my service done, until they built the wall for the fallen ones. Found my way to that wall in June. I saw people there healing wounds. Then a woman said, excuse me, sir, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. I was there the day that you came home. I was there yelling the insults thrown. Sorry for the things we said. You were the best of our generation, honorable men. Please forgive the things I did. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive. I said I love my country, a country that didn't want me back. So I'll thank you kindly for that olive branch. Maybe one day we can find peace in a world all torn. Maybe one day we can stop sending our kids to war.